Hey, Rebel Bankers, this is your host, Chris Noggle, and welcome back to the show. I have an exciting guest, Jared Holland here, and Jared is from Seattle. Now, if you guys don't know anything about the Seattle, Washington market, you're going to be blown away when you hear about how much real estate costs out there and what he's doing, because he's doing some really cool things. But before we get into Jared and his story and everything we're going to talk about today, I want to talk about you guys. I want to talk about your journey to becoming a Rebel Banker. We talk about this all the time, right? Becoming a Rebel Banker, learning how money works, becoming the bank, all of those things. None of those are ever going to work for you if you don't get started. You have to take the first step. You have to take whatever knowledge you get from this podcast, from the trainings, and from everything else that you do on a daily basis to further your career, and you have to apply it. Knowledge without application is useless. Don't waste your time. Get started today. Grab a copy of my book, The Private Money Guide, and that's a great start to learn how money works. But what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Jared. We're going to talk about his journey, how he uses money today, but not just today. We're going to talk about how he used money when he first got started and what he's had to learn to get where he is today, because he has been in the business roughly 5 years and he's done a lot of big things. So, Jared, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm excited to be here and give you guys some insight on how I've built my business over the past few years.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that business. Tell me just a little bit about your business today. What does it look like?
Yep, absolutely. So today I have multiple, entities and parts of my business, and I've done that kind of strategically. So right now, the primary business is JH1 Homes, which is my investing company. And that company primarily does residential redevelopment. So I do volume fix and flips in Seattle, kind of greater Seattle area. And then I'm also transitioning into new construction. So right now I have 6 townhouses that I'm building in the North Beacon Hill area of Seattle. I'm also going to be closing on a high-end single-family build that I'm going to be starting in the Magnolia neighborhood, which is a really nice area of Seattle as well. And then I continue to do kind of the volume fix and flips. And I also am moving into more buy and hold rental stuff, just as, the long-term game to, be my own banker type deal. So that's one portion of the business. Then I also have the brokerage side, which I have my managing broker's license with Compass. And I'm looking to build a small team in order to help sell my houses and be able to generate more leads as well. So for me, I just got that. I decided to move into that portion of the business about a year ago, actually, is when I realized I needed to do it. I had 10 houses for sale, and I was having brokers call me all the time to hold my houses open. And at that point, I was like, this is silly. I'm passing up on just tons of opportunity to continue to monetize my own deals that I'm creating. So I created that portion. And then I also have JH1 Development, which is a general contracting business. And I have that to be able to serve my clients that I work with on the brokerage side. So my goal is to really create this kind of unique ecosystem to where everybody can help each other throughout this whole process. And I'm able to monetize multiple portions of the business and really, I guess, control every part of the transaction as well.
And I know we talked earlier on your brokerage team, you have 3 other reps that are helping you with that. But how many employees do you have in total amongst all the property or all the different companies you have?
So I only have, within JH1 Homes, I only really have one W-2'd employee. That's my office manager. Then I have an acquisitions manager, and then I have a project manager. So I guess I have 3 directly within JH1 Homes. And then I have the brokers, and their job is to basically help field leads for me. And then they also do open houses, and then they're doing, everyone is always doing acquisitions because you kind of always need to be looking. But within just my core company, it's really only 3 primary employees. And then outside of that, then I have the brokerage side. And then you get into the contracting, subs and GCs. And, there are times I have as many as about 40 contractors working for me when I'm really moving.
Okay. And how much is property in the Seattle, Washington market? Because my audience here probably doesn't know much about that market and how expensive it is. So you had mentioned the 6 townhouses, the 1 high-end single family house. Tell them what the cost of these things are.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, the townhouse one is a great example to talk about creative financing because it's so expensive out here. So that townhouse property was something that one of my investors kind of had in their family, and they wanted $1.2 million for it at the time. And they wanted to sell it for 1.2, and then we sell each unit for anywhere between $699 on the lowest end to, on a really great day, $750, right? So those are the rough numbers on the townhouse. And each of those townhouses are actually only going to be between about a little over 1,000 square feet to about 1,200 square feet. So they're not very big. So we definitely have a lot higher price point in Seattle. And to be honest, when I first got into the business, that intimidated me. I was pretty worried. I was like, what do I do? I didn't have any money. I didn't know how to negotiate this stuff. So that was actually something that was really intimidating for me early on. But this deal is an example of being creative. So like this specific deal, we negotiated kind of a partnership with the seller to let us get the project permit ready before actually closing on it, right? We didn't have to we ended up paying 1.25 total for the property, but we paid an extra 50 grand, but we also were able to wait a year and a half almost. Well, it was actually close to a year before we actually closed on the property, and it was permit ready. So that was able to save us just a huge amount in closing costs just by being a little bit more creative on the deal structure with them.
That's incredible. So let's go back to like when you began. So you started this business, you said 5 years ago, correct?
I'm going into year 5 right now. Yeah.
Okay.
So the very end of 2013 is when I created the business.
So you started in 2013. Let's talk a little bit about like what got you into the business, what it was like back then, and just tell the audience kind of your journey of what that looked like from back then. Where were you at? What were you doing? And then how did you transitioned into real estate, and then you've built this over 5 years. So what was that whole journey like? How did you find the money in the beginning? Because even though, real estate's that much now, it was still expensive back then. So jumping into that, I mean, here we're dealing in real estate that's like, 100 to 200. You're dealing in real estate that's like $1 million. Like, that's a big leap, and that's a big carry cost. So just tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually kind of an interesting story. So my whole background has been in construction. I started in commercial construction, kind of boots on the ground. I was a general foreman for a specialty trade, and I worked in big buildings, skyscrapers, Amazon, Microsoft, hospitals, that kind of thing. That was always a means to an end for me. I knew I wanted to do something else. And so after about 5 years of being in that, I started to do a painting company. So I did a painting franchise, actually. It taught me how to run a business, which was exactly what I really wanted and needed. I always wanted to own a business. I just had no idea what I wanted to do. My first year, I was painting houses in Mercer Island, which is a very affluent area in the Seattle market, or the Seattle area, I guess. And these houses sell on the lowest end, like $1 million to $5 million homes are in these areas. And so I was painting someone's house, and they were telling me, oh, we're getting it ready to sell. We just bought it a couple years ago. They showed me they just renovated the kitchen, and this was like a house hack, right? They moved into the house, they lived in it, they did all of this work, and they were telling me they were going to make like $200,000 or $300,000. And at that point, I was just like, that's more money than I've ever heard you can make doing anything, So I was like, oh my God, what is real estate about? I had no idea, never looked at it. My family owned a primary residence growing up, but that was as far as my real estate knowledge went. So after that, I immediately got the bug. I started talking to everyone in Mercer Island, who again are like very well-to-do people. I'm going to get into real estate. They tell me I should do commercial real estate because of my background. I start going that route. And then I ended up hearing radio ads for mentorship programs, which you hear all the time, right? And I ended up going to one of them, and I ended up joining it. And I got kind of lucky because there are a ton out there that are a waste of money and don't give you a lot of good guidance. I ended up joining one that was good. And I'm someone that if you can tell me what to do, then I can do it. So it was a franchise-like model. I jumped in. I spent almost every penny I had at that time from my painting company, expected to be flipping a house within 3 months, be making all kinds of money in no time. It's not really the way the world works, typically, unless you have a ton of experience or a ton of capital. And I had zero, literally no experience, and I had no money at the time. So I basically spent about a year really learning. I think it was around 8 months or so, and I created my business. I just started marketing immediately because that's the first thing that you really have to do, right? you can't do a deal if you can't find a deal. So I immediately started marketing, just jumping in. And then I did one wholesale deal and I only made like $1,000 on it. It was a ton of work. But what I think will be really helpful for, I guess, your audience is the way that I structured my very first flip that I had actually done was a partnership with a seller. And so this was, I think, about a year in at this point. I had gone back, ran my painting company again, even though I really didn't want to, and I did really well at that. I was in a position to where I was comfortable again, and I found a house. And I actually tried to wholesale it for about a month or so. And I knew it was a deal. I just 100% knew it was a deal. The seller wanted something like 200,000. I can't remember the exact numbers now, maybe 250, somewhere around, somewhere in the low $200,000 range they wanted for it. And I wasn't able to sell it, but I knew it was a deal. So I went back to the sellers and I said, hey, let me renovate the house for you. Like I'll put up all the money to do the work. I didn't have any money. I didn't know where I was going to get the money either, but I knew I could find it and I'll list it for you because I was a broker. So I got my broker's license right when I went full time. And that was really just to kind of learn. And it was just to have another tool in my tool belt. So I negotiated a deal with the sellers to where they actually paid for all the carrying costs still. So they paid for the mortgage, they paid for the utilities, and they really did everything until I finished the house. And I ended up borrowing money. I needed about $24,000, I think, for the deal. And something I would really recommend to people also is for your first flip, it's really good to either have a mentor, somebody who's going to literally walk you through it step by step, or partner with someone. This was one of the easiest flips that I've done to date. And I knew it was pretty easy, but I still partnered with someone else. We both went in 50-50 on the funds. I actually borrowed mine from a friend. It was only like $12,000, but again, it's like I didn't really have any money to do this. So I borrowed the money and we ended up, doing the project. It was really easy. It was just like paint. I don't even think it was just paint, replacing hardware, appliances, and like some other minor repairs. And then we ended up listing the house and we sold it within, a few days. And so that was the very first flip that I had ever done. It was a free house, zero out of pocket, just, being confident, knowing my numbers, and I was able to put the deal together.
That's awesome. And that first story, that house there is almost the identical story of when me and Larissa started flipping houses. This would have been my third one. I did the same thing. So we found somebody that it was an estate deal. The family, we knew them just through somebody. We had them hold the mortgage. And then what we did is we came up with the money to do the renovations. And it was things like we took money out of 401ks. We took money out of life insurance policies as loans. And that's how we paid for the renovation. So very similar story. And a lot of people don't even realize you can do deals like that. They're not common, but if you don't ask, you'll never find one of those. And sometimes doing that and splitting it with the owner of the house, they're making more money because they're getting not only what what you would have paid them for, but then they're splitting in the profit. So, it doesn't matter if you give them some of the profit because otherwise you wouldn't have even had the deal in the first place. So it's a great way to get started.
Yeah. And to be honest, in my first, I think year and a half to 2 years, I did 9 or 10 seller financing deals like that. And I either released a very small amount of money, like maybe $5,000. And then they slightly changed as we went on. I ended up covering carrying costs for them. But because I was in a position to where I either had one investor at the time who only had, maybe a couple $100,000 to invest with, or I just would get more creative with each of my deals and figuring out people's motivation, then you can really tailor each of these offers around that. And I ended up coming across several rentals because that's what I was targeting, right? Non-owner occupied properties. And so they were a little less motivated. And so when you offer someone an extra, $10, $25, $50,000, depending on the price point of the house, to wait anywhere from 3 to, 9 months on the long end, that sounds pretty good and it doesn't cost you anything at all. And then I only have to come up with the funds to renovate the house. So that was something I did really creative early on. And I think that gave me a pretty huge advantage to be able to scale my business in a pretty quick way. My first full-time year flipping, I think I did 16 flips. So I was able to scale really quickly, but because I wasn't able to, or I didn't need to use quite as much capital as if I were to pay cash for all of these, or if I were to use hard money loans.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great way. And 16 is a lot. I mean, 16 deals at what, 200 to, what were
More than
those
that.
deals? Yeah, way more than that. You were just talking about, 500, 900,000 there. And then we were talking about those condos. That's insanity.
Yeah. So my average purchase price around here is usually around 500, and I try to sell below 1.5. So, and that's the median price point in Seattle is usually somewhere, it's depending on exact areas, is around, I would say 600 on the low end to about 900, depending if you get into like the little nicer pockets.
And what is your formula for like your profit requirement? So every single deal you get into, do you have a minimum profit that you're taking on those deals?
Yeah. So, and that's actually changed. I don't know how the market is everywhere else. I know it's just a little bit, more shaky these days and kind of more stabilized, I guess. But back in 2017 and 2016, when I just couldn't miss, I would buy almost, 70K was my minimum profit, and I'd shoot for about I think at that point it was like a 12 to like 15% ROI on my money. And at that point, everything was selling over. And again, like, you just couldn't miss because there was so little inventory and the market was just super hot. So now my buying criteria is definitely a lot more strict because there's a lot more inventory. I typically won't buy on busy streets anymore. I've been burned really badly by buying properties on like double yellow line streets, like busy corners, that kind of thing. Otherwise, I need a 100K return on my investment or a minimum of an 18% ROI. So, and it just kind of sliding scale, just depending on the price point of the deal. I might fudge the numbers a little bit, but the 18% is usually something that'll keep it pretty close. But once you get into, the higher properties, like the one I bought for, 900,000, when you get into those, 18% is a pretty huge number. So then sometimes I might have a little bit more flexibility in those returns.
Yeah, that's smart. So through this whole journey, what was your biggest external obstacle that you had to face from, when you did that first flip to where you're at now in the scaling? What would you say your biggest external obstacle would be?
I would say it's something that I've been working on a lot kind of this year, and it's happening as you grow a business, right? So I feel like as a business owner, you can get into these positions to where you can just be comfortable and you can kind of keep maintaining kind of where you're at and you can be at a comfortable position. But I'm not that kind of person, right? So I want to continue to push my boundaries and my limits and my business's limits. So for me, it's building a strong team to be able to support you and the business as a whole. And then keeping, I guess contractors are always one of the hardest things to keep in line. I see your face there. He agrees. It's probably a very common topic, right? So, and that still falls under employees. When I owned my painting company, that was the first time I realized how difficult it is to find really good employees. And so I would say that's the biggest hurdle that's constantly overcoming. I have to get new electricians. Electricians I have the highest turnover in them over anyone else. I don't know why, but it's just employees, I would say, is the hardest thing to really keep solid and keep everybody motivated and want to work and do as good a job as you do.
Yeah, it's definitely our biggest struggle, hands down, no questions. Contractors, by far, our biggest pain in the butt. Lately, it's also been like the property inspectors. I call them deal killers because literally, I don't know where these guys come from. I don't know what rock they're crawling out of. No disrespect to any of you watching if you are property inspectors, but I don't care because honestly, it's just gotten to the point where your job is to come in and kill every single deal you look at because that's what it seems like. They're just pointing out the simplest things. A lot of times outlets, in these houses, you plug something in, we miss the ground, right? So the ground doesn't check out. They tell the homeowner who's buying it, who's always a first-time home buyer, that there's an electrical problem. Home buyer says, "Oh God, no." All it was is a ground. But they don't explain that. They're just like, "Oh, I did my job. I told her there was no ground on that one, and if she plugs into that, it could burn the whole house down or shock you or do whatever." I mean, come on. I tell that story because that just happened. It's very fresh right now. Yeah. All right. So that was your external obstacle. How about internal? What would be your biggest internal obstacle that you face, even in today's business?
Yeah, even in today's business, it kind of falls under the same thing. And the internal thing is me being the kind kind of pinching point, right? Or the person who has to say the final things on, or have the final say on things. That's something that I've had to work on quite a bit in order to be able to, I guess, continue the workflow as well, right? So like if there are things, I was just out of town for a couple weeks, and if I would have just given them full control on some of these projects, they wouldn't have needed to reach out to me to get confirmation on a design choice or like a layout question, something along those lines. So that internal thing is, it all, for me, like it just at this point in my business, it all flows back to the same thing, trying to scale a business and being able to let go of certain parts of it is incredibly difficult. I would say that, and honestly, accounting, man, holy moly. Like I don't know, when you do as many transactions at one time as I am, and you're doing this many, buying these many things and just keeping organized has been an absolute huge hurdle to overcome. And I feel like I'm about this close to getting it done, but it's still one of those things that it hit me really hard about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when I hired my first accountant. And that was just finding a good system for accounting was really difficult for me. So those two things, I would say.
Yeah, well, I've struggled with that as well, and I've always been really good with numbers. I've owned businesses since 16. Always done my own bookkeeping, but this business has a volume that will sink the best of them. And I've had bad CPAs, and the best thing I've done now is I've trained my staff, a couple of my key employees, how to actually do simple bookkeeping, enter data, pay bills, track bills, filing, and all that stuff, just so the basic stuff's taken care of. So if I get hit by a bus and I'm in the hospital and I can't come in, they at least can get everybody paid and know how that system works. And then I hired a really good bookkeeper. And, I went through so many terrible bookkeepers. They'd come in here and they'd say, oh, I've been doing this 25 years. They would see the volume. Within 2 weeks, I had two of them, literally 2 weeks, quit. And then the next one made it 2.5 weeks, quit. That's how much volume we're dealing with here. It's a monumental thing. So you got to get that off your plate. Otherwise, you will be so stuck in your business working on that. And as you scale, it'll get worse and worse and worse. So train people, teach people. I know it's kind of that thing you don't want to let go of because it's money, but you're going to have to. It's the worst, trying to pay all those bills and get them done, especially for contractors, because I don't know how it is in Seattle, but here in Buffalo, they finish their job. They think they're strolling right over to our office to pick up checks, even though in the agreement that they signed, it says we can pay them within 30 days. Yeah, they somehow missed that. They were just thinking, oh, how much? Great, I'll sign. Yeah. Oh, anyway, off that soapbox. Yeah, that's just...
At least your accountants quit on you. Okay, mine just destroyed my books for about 6 to 9 months, and I'm not paying attention. And then I just get this massive list of transactions that they ask where they go, basically when it's time to do taxes. And I'm like, this is 8 months of questions that you just asked me. So I wish they would have just quit on me.
Wow.
That would have been nice.
Well, don't think for a second that the ones that quit didn't create a massive issue, all in the same. But, it's just part of learning. And there's really there's no way you really ever figure that out outside of just going out and doing it. But just the biggest advice I could give to anybody watching this is when you are looking to hire a bookkeeper, absolutely do not go for the low priced ones. Yeah. Pay the money. It doesn't matter what they cost. I mean, as long as they're good and they're going to be on site doing it, or at least you can monitor their activity. Get somebody that's in real estate, that's done real estate accounting, and that's the person you pay. And just pay them, because otherwise you're going to be screwed. So with that being said, and time being short, how would, this has been great, but how would people learn more about you or follow you or anything like that? What's the best way they can track you down?
Yeah, absolutely. So people can find me on my Instagram. It's Jared Flips Seattle. So they can find me there. Otherwise, you can find me online. I have several websites. JaredBuysHouses.com is one. And then JH1 Homes is my primary website. And then you can also find me as a broker on the Compass website. So if you just Google Jared Holland Seattle, there's a lot of ways that you can get in touch with me if people have questions. I really do try pretty hard to respond to people quite often and help when I can. I don't get anything out of it outside of, people asking questions to me or you. It helps us be better at what we do. So I really do try to help and give as much guidance and advice whenever I can.
Awesome. So you guys check him out. He's dropping some gold nuggets, doing some big things. It's funny, when we bring someone like Jared on here, he's been doing it for 5 years and he's learning, probably taking some lumps on the head through this. You had mentioned he had some trouble with a couple of those, and I kind of know what that means because I've been there. But the one thing you'll find is the people that are doing it are still making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. It's the only way, folks. So don't think that you're going to just jump into this business and everything's going to be perfect and you're just going to sail off into the sunset. The best way you can possibly get it right in this business is to follow the lead. Get a mentor, get somebody that can show you the right way to do it. Work with someone like Jared, on a JV and just follow him around. Just follow him around for a couple of weeks and see what his company does and how he does it. You'll learn more from that than anything else you can ever do. But the problem is so many people are unwilling to put the work forth or, go out there and spend a week for free to follow someone around that can teach them everything because everybody's looking at the short game. Play the long game, folks. And on your journey to becoming a rebel banker, you guys know the secrets. Get the knowledge and apply the knowledge. So I hope you guys like this edition of the Real Estate Money School. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Have a good day.